Another dollar to make your mama holla, baby. What's good? It's Saturday Night Nerds. We got a brand new spinoff for you guys, and this is Jacob's Films perspective. So, everybody, I
Yeah.
want you to meet Jacob Smith and Nick. Uh, Let me make sure I don't butcher his last name.
Oh
Luka
no,
Lukacic.
Lakacic.
Lukacic. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm celebrating, and I fucked up. Man, whatever. I'll bounce back from this. But yeah, tonight we're talking about Evil Dead Rise. So before we get into all that, we'll play something nice for you guys real quick. Yes, that was a spicy intro.
That was pretty solid. Pretty
Yeah.
solid.
That's like one of our old theme songs. The very first one, actually, the OG SNN theme song. But yep, without
Yeah.
further ado, Jacob is going to open up a can of mute movie review, and
Yeah, boy.
we'll start with some Evil Dead Rise. And pow. So, what did you think about the movie? But is it pretty much what was it actually like entertaining throughout from start to finish?
I don't know about Nick's perspective. I feel like Nick's gonna have a totally hot take on this, but I'll just go with mine first. I thought, and this is controversial to most people probably. I thought it's right up there with part two is the best in the series, and
Nope.
that's just my perspective. I mean, the gore, great practical. They actually use practical effects in 2023, which is always good. Tired of the CGI stuff.
Absolutely.
That was one of my problems with the remake. I felt like they used too much CGI in the remake. If you've seen the 2013 one, and
Yeah, man.
that's people love that one, but I do not care for that one. That's my least favorite.
Yeah, I made it through that one. It still had the same effect on me as the other Evil Deads. I was like, it was just as gross and ratchet, but I would say the second Evil Dead is definitely up there, like top three out of the whole franchise for me.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's number one for me easily. One of my favorite horror movies, but Evil Dead Rise, it shocked me. It was really, really good. The practical effects was good. The actress that plays the mom, Alyssa
Yeah,
Sutherland is her name. She did amazing. The practical effects work they did on her face was just really, really good. And they kind of do it a little darker because it's about I mean, it's about a family. Like part of my reviews, I don't give away too much, but all I'll say is it's about a family in an apartment building, basically. So I feel like the stakes are higher because it's not just teenagers in a cabin anymore. It's a mother and her kids, so it's more,
yeah.
it's more brutal, more dark because it's little kids that are getting, infected with deadite stuff, and and yeah. So that's like my quick thoughts, real quick. I want to see what Nick thinks. So
So,
Yeah.
firstly, my favorite Evil Dead movie has to be the 2013 remake. For
oh
me, it's
god,
the remake, the original, and I would put the newer one, Evil Dead Rise, number three. Evil Dead Rise was good. It wasn't as good as the remake, in my opinion. I like the remake a lot. One thing I do like about the new Evil Dead Rise movie is how, as Jacob said, it it has a family in there. It reminds me of like Candyman and like the new Hellraiser movie where they're adding more characters that are not just like dumb teenagers.
Right.
Another aspect I liked about was how they unleashed the Deadites by listening to a record instead of like finding the actual book. That's something I really enjoyed because one aspect I really don't like about the franchise that much anymore is how they find the book, they read it, and then all this like scary stuff happens. But instead they find these records, which gives us the Ash Williams cameo, which I really liked. But I feel like the family and the records were probably two of the highlights of that movie. Because again, as Jacob said, the family brings a whole nother element to it. And I do feel like with the remake, there was that element already kind of like teased because the main character, she was a recovering heroin addict. So she wasn't just a dumb teenager. She was someone who was struggling with addiction. And whenever she got possessed by the Deadite, a lot of her friends were like, oh, she's just like having withdrawals and stuff like that. But I would put Evil Dead Rise in my top 3. It's good, but it's not 2013 remake good.
That 2013 remake is really tough to compete with.
I gotta pick your brain on that, Nick. I gotta pick your brain. What about that 2013 remake? Besides, okay, the concept is great. I love the concept of like, she's a heroin addict and they're taking her out to the cabin. So like when she's freaking out, they don't know whether it's her withdrawing or it's actual real, stuff. But other than that, I feel like the execution was poorly done. Besides a few cool kills, because the blood looks like brown in the whole movie. Like, it looks more like chocolate than blood a lot of the time. And like the end is pretty cool when it rains blood, but and spoiler alert, but it's been 10 years, so if you haven't seen it, you haven't seen it. But
right.
And I mean the chainsaw at the end and the blood rain is really cool. But other than that, it's my least favorite. Like I take the original Evil Dead, which is not a great movie at all. It's just very. I respect that movie more than I love it. It's what Sam Raimi did as a college student's crazy. With that movie.
It really is. But I think one thing I really like about the 2013 remake is every Evil Dead movie feels like it's from that respective time period. The original feels like it's from the 70s and the 80s. The remake really feels like an early 2000s 10 movie. And this one, 10 years from now, or even like 30 years from now, people will look at it and be like, yeah, this movie is a good representation of like the early 2020s, if you will. That's one reason why I like the 2013 remake movie a lot. Because during that time, there were just a ton of remakes coming out everywhere. Yeah. And I feel like this one, the 2013 remake, was really a cream of the crop. Because it had good gore, but the gore wasn't like in a Saw type way. It was more in a like over the top, not torture porn like way. And I just feel like each Evil Dead movie represents the time period it came out in like a very good way. And I think that's one thing I really like about the 2013 remake. But also, I'm a big fan of the end scene with the chainsaw. Like that scene, it's so hard to top. It's so hard to top.
It's up there for sure. And Sam Raimi, I've always been a big Sam Raimi fan. Even when he does like reckless stuff as a director, he has like a long list of successful shows and movies that he's a part of, and it's just like, how can you be mad at him? He gave us Spartacus and a whole lot of other great content. So I think picking him for like Multiverse of Madness was like that was a reckless choice, but it turned out well in my opinion. So he made Multiverse of Madness basically a Scarlet Witch Evil Dead type of movie, and I needed to see some crazy stuff like that. So, and we got Bruce Campbell as well in both movies. So
you got Bruce Campbell in all of them.
I will say, like talking about Bruce Campbell in both movies, I feel like his cameo in Evil Dead Rise was better than his cameo in the 2013. Because the 2013 one, it just felt too tacky in some sense because it just ended on him saying groovy and it had like that weird sound effect and like zoomed in on his face. But but with the new movie, like the cameo actually felt like Ash Williams, like the original Ash Williams from the first two movies.
Yeah.
I agree with that. It actually incorporated him into the story, whereas like the 2013 remake, it was just like a MCU end credit scene where it's like, hey, remember this guy?
He's
I
like, by
agree
the
with
way,
Bruce
hello.
Campbell's here.
Everybody's reaction to him is the same. It's Bruce fucking Campbell.
Yeah.
I will say, like, one thing that really like kind of shocked me when the movie first came out is like on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, and like on Facebook and other stuff like that. People were saying it was like the most disturbing movie that came out in years, that this movie will shock you and all that. And like, don't get me wrong, the movie had some pretty scary moments in it, but at the same time, I feel like it did live up to like that type of hype. Like I've seen worse movies than that, so I guess it did, like, some scenes didn't bother me that much. But I can see how, like, in terms of like recent horror movies that are more like slow burn, that the level of violence in Evil Dead Rise could probably shock your casual moviegoer.
Yeah. It's hard for me to get back into that because that was all 90s and 80s movies for me. So I got accustomed to it. But then when they stopped in like the 2000s and going forward, it's just like, man, I guess I got to get used to this less gore and less like intense violence in horror movies anymore. So
Yeah, the tame PG-13 stuff started coming out, and CGI violence and CGI blood. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's practical.
yeah. Like the most violence I would see like in that era would probably be from animated shows, because it's like you watch Happy Tree Friends or Rick and Morty and just watch so much chaos and bloods and bones and organs pull out. It's just like, man.
Hey, Happy Tree Friends, if you watched that in middle school, you were the shit.
Oh man.
It was so good. It was so good.
This show was a mess, but I loved it.
I remember my cousin showing me that, and I was like, what the hell was this? I was like 12 years old, watching a raccoon get fucking gutted completely or whatever, and I'm just like, what is happening?
Everything just starts off so nice and innocent, and then just something like the most horrible accident you can think of happens to one of those little cute creatures. So it's just like,
yeah,
I feel bad for them.
I mean, the first episode I saw of it was probably the most famous one, where like the one squirrel's like making lemonade and the other squirrel's eyeball comes out, and the squirrel like cuts in, like starts to making lemonade. Like I actually remember, like, you know, like kind of like not freaking out, but kind of like cringing at that, because it was like, that's so like nasty if you really sit and just think about it, like after the fact. I'm just like, that's so nasty.
It's top tier gross. And I think Evil Dead Rise would definitely like lead the way for other horror movies to bring that type of gore back.
Oh yes.
And the guy that directed it, I don't want to butcher his name. I forgot his name exactly. I'd have to look it up. But he's an Irish. He's from Ireland, and he directed a movie called The Hole in the Ground that came out in 2019, 2020, and it's on HBO Max right now. And it's I guess because of the new movie came out, and it's Lee Cronenberg. That's his name. Lee Cronenberg or something like that. And
yeah,
he's a director to watch for sure, because The Hole in the Ground, I think, was his first big feature, and that is a great, like, if you've seen Evil Dead Rise and you like that, definitely go check out Hole in the Ground on HBO Max. I'll give him a shout out. That's his first movie. His first big feature movie. Definitely go watch that on HBO Max right now. It's a great horror movie. It's one of the better ones in the last few years, honestly, besides Evil Dead Rise. But now it's just Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell. I think they're just looking for young and hungry directors to take the Evil Dead franchise in a different directions. What Evil Dead Rise seemed to me, because even the cinematography, it's the best cinematography in the whole series. I don't think you can deny that.
Absolutely not.
No, it is.
On the Evil Dead Rise, because there are some scenes where like, this actually looks like an actual real movie, like, because like, I don't want to down earlier Evil Dead movies, but man, the cinematography is not the show of. I mean, that's not the point of those movies anyway. But like, it just added another layer to it when the cinematography is just so gorgeous. Like there were some gorgeous shots in Evil Dead Rise that I was just like, they're actually trying really hard in this movie. Like I respect it.
Yeah, it's crazy because I got to get my eyes adjusted for real. Because most movies, I'm so used to like basic level cinematography, excuse me. And I think like the most recent movies that I fell in love with, like the Batman. I thought Matt Reeves captured the whole background. Actually, the one scene in particular where Bruce Wayne is coming to talk to Carmine, like that whole scene of him coming off the elevator and he's just like, I'm just cool as hell and I'm just mad. I just got some bad news, but I'm willing to risk it all. Like that whole scene that he captured, the cinematography was great. And then another good movie, of course, Evil Dead Rise, and I would say Midsummer had really good cinematography as well.
It did. It did.
Yeah.
And I think one thing about Evil Dead Rise is I feel like people forget that in terms of horror franchises, Evil Dead is pretty mainstream at this point. It's not like a small like cult thing anymore. And I think, that I think the quality of Evil Dead Rise shows that, it's gained this bigger audience. And when you get this bigger audience, people are going to want to see better quality, not just in story, but like in other stuff like acting, cinematography, and all that. And I personally feel like the next Evil Dead movie that comes out in like 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to even top Evil Dead Rise in terms of all that stuff.
Absolutely.
As long as Sam Raimi's running the executive producer seat, I think we're in good hands because he knows young directors. Obviously, I mean, he knows what he's looking for, and Evil Dead Rise shows that. And I mean, gosh, there's even like references to other horror movies in Evil Dead Rise that I won't spoil, but there's some, you can tell that the guy that directed it is really a big horror fan, that he loves horror and he wants to make actual good horror. Like I would say Evil Dead Rise, and this some people might not agree with this, but I probably say it's probably top 10 best horror films of the last 5 years. When it comes to like just when it comes to overall just everything, I just feel like horror is making a comeback, and Evil Dead Rise is a part of that. Definitely, I think.
I agree. Well, I guess one thing about the comeback is looking at some of the past horror movies. A24 has made some really good horror movies, but at the same time, they also really kickstart the whole slow burn type of horror movies. The slow burn, more like slow pace style, and those type of movies are good. But I feel like audiences are wanting more gore, because last year when Terrifier 2 came out, that movie just went like off the charts. And like I saw that movie, and like the bedroom scene, that was probably the most graphic pre-Evil Dead Rise scene in a horror movie for the last 5 years, in my opinion. Because the market for horror for the past 5, maybe even 10 years, really has been dominated by slow burn A24 style horror movies, and like Jordan Peele, The Lighthouse, and stuff like that. And those movies are all classics. Don't get me wrong, I love them. But the mainstream horror audience, I believe they're wanting to see more gore and a better quality of it. That's not just like something schlocky. They want to see better quality in everything, but they want to see a better quality in the gore.
Yeah, honestly, when I think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is like maybe like a reboot of Final Destination, but with more creative deaths for like the victims. Like if they could reboot Final Destination and start the series over, same story, like guys cheated death, and now they're every person that was like on the plane or whatever that cheated, they go out in like this crazy alternative way, and it is opportunity to get more gore in, and actually you could really have a lot of fun with that. It's a really open-ended concept, and if I was directing Final Destination, I would probably follow in a lot of horror directors' footsteps especially like the OG director for Final Destination. Like I think one of the most classic scenes. It wasn't really gory, but the chick that was in a tanning bed,
Oh
they
yes.
got cooked to death.
Oh, yeah.
Like dude, that was peak horror for me. Like I was like, I'm never getting in a tanning bed. I don't need a tan
yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. I actually, yeah. When I was a little kid, my dad was watching that on the TV, and I walked in the room, and I happened to walk in right on the tanning bed death scene. And ever since then, I've never that movie. Every time I see a tanning bed, that's all I think about is Final Destination. And my best friend at the time, his mom had a tanning bed in her room,
Oh.
and she had the computer in her room, so we'd go up there to play computer games, and I would just be like, that thing's freaking me out, man, like the tanning bed right there, because I could just the Final Destination, just that stuck in my mind completely.
Forever.
Even more than the everybody talks about the wood coming off the truck.
Yeah.
The tanning bed is stuck in my mind more, honestly.
Dude, man, like there was like wood and like some kind of sharp thing that came through and hit somebody through their windshield, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
it was
like,
in the
dude,
second one.
that was a ridiculous scene too. The fact that they avoided that, and then their alternative deaths end up being worse anyway. So it's just like, God. If you see the future and you know everybody's about to get murked, just let it happen.
Yeah. Like, and to that point, I mean, I agree. I didn't think about that before, but I agree with you. I think Final Destination could really benefit from like a today upgrade. Like if they did what they did with Evil Dead Rise with Final Destination and just did, because imagine like Final Destination but with great cinematography. I mean, that would be terrifying. It'd make it even more realistic. I mean, I that's actually a great idea. I think they should do that, honestly.
Yeah, because you got the opportunity for gore right there, and then you can try like different techniques of killing people that weren't used in the other movies, and that shouldn't be too hard. It's just like, oh, he went to a bathroom and took a shit, and the toilet sucked him in. I don't know. you can go crazy with those concepts of people who cheated death, and then death just finds them another way to get them.
Yeah, you really can.
I think one thing they should bring back for like a Final Destination remake is Tony Todd's character.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure he was only in the first two. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But I think he was only in the first two for like a minute. And I really feel like if they made a remake, his character should play a bigger role, but it should still be cryptic, you know. He should be on screen more, but he should still be like the same cryptic type of character he was.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah, because if you like, I remember the credits for one of those movies, and Tony Todd was casted as the voice of the devil. I think that was the first Final Destination, and the first Final Destination was when his voice appeared over on the subway, and like people heard the voice but didn't pay it any mind. Like that scene gave me chills. I didn't even know that was the devil until the credits said so, and Tony Todd played that. So I assume like seeing him in future installments, he would continue being the devil for the series. He was in the morgue in like the second one. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know, I feel like Tony Todd, because like, you know, like because his former big role was Candyman. Yeah. And people will always remember him as Candyman. But I feel like in today's horror world, he needs to find another role that can like settle in with like younger audiences, because they remade Candyman a couple of years ago, which I saw and I loved. But I feel like now Tony Todd needs to find another character that can be this generation's Candyman to some extent.
Absolutely.
Okay, so wait, you loved the new Candyman?
Yeah, I did.
I did not care for that one. I did not.
Man, you're a hater. You're all a hater.
I guess I am a hater, because I was just like, because it's so beating you over the head with this politics and stuff and the social commentary. It's too much. It was too much.
Like, did you not watch the original one at all?
Yeah, but the original one is so subtle. Like, it's just her investigating, but like the social commentary is there, but it's not like a kindergarten teacher like holding your hand through it. Like you pick it up just by watching the movie, and I like it like that, subtle, not like the end scene in that movie in the remake with like in the cop car with the whole cop situation. I was like, okay, now you're going too far with the social comedy. Like we know exactly what you're trying to say now.
Right.
Like,
well, one perspective I read about the new Candyman is the original Candyman movie is told from a white journalist who walks into this community. The remake is told from that community's perspective. It's showing how that community deals with the legend of the Candyman and the trauma that came from it. Because in the remake, Helen, the girl from the original movie, she's shown as like a villain type character, and the perspective also said like in the original Candyman, she was just walking in, trying to get information and trying to leave, while this community would still have to live with the Candyman and the trauma that came from it. So I see that as like a defining difference in the terms of like the social commentary, because the director for the remake was an African American, but the director for the original one was a British guy.
Yeah, Clive Barker, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Clive Barker, he was like a producer on there, but the actual director was I'm trying to remember his name, but he was a British guy. But like having a British director and African American director, you know, I feel like that also brings a different level of perspective on the social commentary.
I have a counterpoint to that, though.
Ooh.
Why? Okay, but the main character we follow is not in the community when we meet him. Like he's from there as a kid, but now he's like high society now. So he's still coming from a higher place to the lower place, just like Helen did. I feel like if they wanted to do that, they should have went full out and had somebody that actually lived in that community to do it, and not have the guy that lived there as a kid that came back that didn't, you know. I feel like anyway.
There was some scenes in that movie that were kind of hard to get through because the whole concept of him like painting his victims or something like that, and it's just like I get that they want to like get like, how do I say this, stay relevant with the younger audience, but I honestly would love some good old fashioned revenge or something petty, but at the same time it's so subtle that you don't really realize it's anything bigger than what you see. So it's like the whole scene with the cops and then the new guy taking the mantle of Candyman. The one thing I do love about that is it shows like it's been more than one of them. So now there's a whole history of Candyman. I never read the books. I think Clive Barker wrote the books.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He did. And the book is actually very interesting because in the book, Candyman is white. And the book deals with class issues like poverty and like upper class instead of a race issue. Because whenever they made the movie, I'm trying to remember how like that transition happened. But the director decided to take it from like England to Chicago, and he added the race elements in there because the original was about like class and all that. And I feel like if people watch either Candyman movie and then read the book afterwards, they're going to have different views on the whole story and concept overall.
Yeah, that backstory for the OG, like not the book version, but the OG live action Candyman, like the fact that he was a slave and he had an affair with the master's wife, and then so they neutered him, messed him up, covered his bodies with honey, and let bees eat him alive while they hung him or something like that. And then he's just been on a rampage killing people that's been in that bloodline of the family, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But
I'm trying to remember because I feel like the bloodline element was added in the sequels. Because in the first one, I think it was just like Helen came across the Candyman urban legend. It was kind of like, you know, like a Bloody Mary type thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And she looked like the girl that he was in love with. That's why he was after her in the original.
Yes. And they actually added the whole like Helen bloodline thing, you know, like because I think in the sequel he was like after Helen's daughter, and I think in the third movie he was after Helen's granddaughter. I might be wrong about like that, you know, like that lineup, but
I think you're correct. I think maybe the movies might have moved around a little bit because at one point in time he did fall in love with like a black female lead, but he did go after Helen's. Actually, you know what? Helen had like not like a descendant, but somebody that was like mixed or something like that, like granddaughter, niece, whatever. And I think Candyman was after her for a little bit.
I never watched the sequels. I stayed away from them because usually horror sequels are a hard thing to do. Usually, I mean, I stayed away from those. I've just seen the original and the remake. And
Yeah,
the remake, when it comes to like taking older franchises and bringing them to life, I feel like the Candyman remake was one of the weak sauce. Weak sauce. That's what I thought. Like, because like they're just banging you over the head with social. It felt like social commentary of the movie, and I was like, we've seen this so much over the past decade, and I mean it's great. I love social commentary or whatever, but commentary I can't talk. But I want like subtlety. I want like the story to be put first, and then you can have that social commentary in there without the banging you over the head. Just the end scene is where they just take a hammer and just smack you in the skull 1,000 times. I swear that end scene just really just soured me on the whole movie. I was like, because I called it immediately 10 minutes before it happened. I was like, I know what's going to happen here. And then it let me down. I did not. No, Candyman remake.
See, oh no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and that guy that played the replacement, he's one of my favorite actors. So to see him go from like top tier performances to that was just like, I'll give it credit for what it's worth. But honestly, I would have appreciated a lot more story about him and then the supporting characters around him.
Yeah, before Nick says something, I'll agree with you on that. I like him a lot. I mean, even as Black Manta, he was great as Black Manta. And I was excited when I saw he was going to be in the Candyman because people were kind of doubting him a little bit. I was like, he's a really good actor. I was like, he'll carry this. And then they didn't really give him much. They didn't really.
They really didn't. I blame the writers for that 100%. He was a great Dr. Manhattan too. And that HBO Max series where that was a story before social commentary. So it's basically, I don't know I can't remember the character's name, but there's a scene in one of the episodes where he's fighting the Ku Klux Klan, and it's just like I was like, yo, this is kind of cool.
Well, I think one thing about Candyman and Clive Barker overall is he's more of a transgressive horror author who focuses mainly on social issues. I would not say Clive Barker and like Candyman and Hellraiser and a lot of his other works are really your normal like Halloween, Friday the 13th type of movies. Yeah. But I feel like the issue that comes out of that is to get adapted by directors and for audiences who are more familiar with Halloween and Friday the 13th and they want to see that type of movie. Because I remember when I saw Candyman, the remake in theaters, there were a lot of people around me who were just like making faces at it. They were mumbling about it and stuff like that. And one thing I will say, I do agree the ending, it does get a bit preachy. But the one counterpoint I have to that is in real life, since this movie is like talking about real life things, there is no subtlety in the real life like actions that have inspired this movie, And I feel like in terms of remakes, I like Candyman, but I will probably put it in the mid section of like all the more recent horror movie remakes. But in terms of like Clive Barker movies, it's definitely in the top 3 for me.
Oh, top 3?
Top 3, yes.
Have you seen Nightbreed?
I have, yes, I have. And
Nightbreed is my favorite Clive Barker.
My favorite Clive Barker has to be the OG Hellraiser.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right there with it.
Because the dialogue's so good, all the scenes are really good, and it's one of those things where like I've seen some of the Hellraiser sequels, and they get goofy pretty fast.
Oh yeah,
they do.
Even the second one. The second one is way out there.
The second one, the problem with the second one is by the time it came out, Pinhead was very popular. So people wanted to see more Pinhead, and Clive Barker was like, no, I don't want that. He's supposed to be like a Dracula type character. And the
Yeah.
studios, shocker, they're like, well, screw you. He's going to be like the Mickey Mouse of this franchise.
Yeah, and
They,
and they go to that they go to the hell dimension most of that movie, and it just looks so bad. And they're like running through the hallways, and the hallways are changing with the mute and they have the mute little girl that doesn't speak, and I'm just like, what is go? I was like, this is such a drop from the first Hellraiser. I was like, this is sad.
this is an acid trip. Yeah.
It felt trippy. It was a trippy. The second one is a trippy sequel.
Mhm.
I feel like the whole like asylum setting could have been like done properly, but I feel like the movie was rushed considering the popularity of the first one. I do like the mute girl element. I feel like it was done wrong, and it's interesting because I was reading about Hellraiser 2. Is the wicked stepmom character? Clive Barker wanted her to be the main villain of the entire series, not Pinhead. He said if there was like another sequel, he wanted the focus on her and not Pinhead, which I found very interesting because after watching the first one and the second one, I personally still like Pinhead the best out of those two characters.
Yeah, I love the Cenobites in general, and the fact that they kept expanding on them and trying to give us a little bit more background on them. But like Nick said, my favorite aspect of it is when Clive or whoever's directing decides to focus more on the human villains than the Cenobites. And it's the reboot, for example, that came out like last year. The bad guy was the guy who owned the Pandora's box, and he's just been manipulating people to play it for him all throughout the movie. And I thought that was pretty cool. So it was more like trying to stop him versus trying to stop the new Pinhead. And I thought that was cool.
Yeah, now that we're talking about reboots and remakes and all that, I feel like the Hellraiser reboot for Hulu was actually really well done.
No, it was. It was. And
I thought it was one of the better ones recently, I think.
Yeah, that was like one of my top films the last year.
I liked it, but I would personally put it like below the Candyman remake. Personally, there are elements of the new Hellraiser remake that I really like. I like that they changed the gender of Pinhead. I really do like that because that's very Clive Barker. That's something he would do. And I remember
she's a great actress too.
Oh, she was. Like I remember a lot of people got upset about that, but I'm like, Clive Barker has always done stuff like that. He's not like your normal, like straightforward horror author. He twists around with stuff, you know.
He's a weirdo.
He is. Yeah. That's one element I liked about it. But
Pinhead was a woman in the book, so most people don't know that.
Yeah, and like it makes me really excited to see if hopefully 10 years down the road we get like this Clive Barker Avengers style movie with like all of his creatures like fighting against each other, because ever since Candyman came out, people have been wanting to really see like a Pinhead versus Candyman movie. And I think there were actual talks about that back in the 90s or the early 2000s. There were actual talks about that.
Dude.
But
I think we got enough with Freddy versus Jason, didn't we? I mean,
yeah, I'm not going to lie, guys. I'm not going to lie. Freddy versus Jason is trash. I'm sorry. I have to say it. I have to say it. Like, I watched it when I was 13. I loved it, but I was 13. I'm 22 now. That movie sucks.
I was here for all the ratchet shit. That's what I was here for.
Yeah, I it's not a great movie at all. I agree, but it's entertaining. It's entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think my favorite scenes are the ones where whenever someone gets hit, they just fly. They just fly across the screen for like no reason. Because there's one scene where Jason and Freddy, like something explodes by them, they do like a Looney Tunes like fly across the screen. I'm like, really? Like they're flying like Superman right now. But
you got the oxygen tank scene where Jason's like Freddy's cutting the oxygen, and Jason's he gets hit with a tank and he's like flying.
I think the worst part about that movie was the writers tried to say that Jason's weakness was water, even though in all the previous Friday the 13th movies he's shown in water, like he's shown like, you know, standing in water, like swimming in water or whatever. And I remember watching it. I'm like, that's such a stupid like idea. Like Freddy's makes sense, but like Really? Like the whole water versus fire thing? Like that's the best
Ugh.
you guys can do?
I don't have no justification for that whatsoever.
I love
It's
how
actually. Oh no, go ahead.
you go ahead.
Well, it's actually one fun fact about that movie is Pinhead was supposed to be in it because one of the original drafts were they were going to end up in hell and Pinhead was like going to greet them or something. Then that would have opened up for like a Pinhead versus Jason versus Freddy movie. But I think the studio that owned Pinhead said there's no way in hell we're doing that.
It's too ratchet.
Yeah, come on. I
It's
mean,
fact that.
they set it up like I think that was like, and I think it's Jason Goes to Hell. They set it up in like 11 years in advance when Freddy. You see Freddy. I think it's Freddy's glove that comes down over Jason's
Yes.
mask,
Yes.
and then you had to wait 11 years, and then you get that. Like, imagine being a kid, and like being somebody who was born like in the 70s, 80s. And you're a kid in the theater and you're watching Jason Goes to Hell and you see Freddy's glove at the end come get Jason's mask. You're so excited. You're like, oh, I can't wait. And then it's 11 years you have to wait for the movie, and what you get is Freddy versus Jason. Like,
The movie is very much a 2000s movie. Like watching it, it just feels super dated in terms of like aesthetic and dialogue and even the characters. Because like,
the main girl was horrible.
oh no,
Yeah.
she was, and like I feel like that movie was trying to break the mold that Scream set up, but at the same time, I feel like it was too much of to an extent, a Scream ripoff in some sense. Like I'm not saying it was super meta, but after watching Scream and after watching Freddy versus Jason, there are some similarities in it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I honestly think like Freddy knowing like martial arts out of nowhere, that was like the fact to see him put hands on Jason like that. It was just like, I don't know whose idea this was, but I guess I'll get to the end of the movie off of this. And
well, one fact about that I read is the director, the director of Freddy versus Jason, he originally did like kung fu movies, I believe. So he was trying to like mix that influence in there, but at the same time, it's like we never saw that in the original movies. So like it's like if Michael Myers started like breakdancing all of a sudden in a movie. You can't do that. You can't do
He's
that.
twerking.
Yeah, because the guy that directed that actually directed Bride of Chucky as well. The same director as Bride of Chucky.
Bride of Chucky. That's a good movie right there.
That is a good movie.
That is a good one. I agree with that. That's a good movie. See, you know what? Seed of Chucky is god awful. It is terrible. I love Seed of Chucky. It is the most hilarious movie. It's hilarious.
As a kid, I could not get through it. I could not get through it. But I enjoyed it the one time that I saw it from start to finish.
The little British, and he doesn't know. Nowadays, it's kind of taboo nowadays because of the whole how they did that with their kid or whatever. But like, it was just. I watched it for the first time I think 2 years ago, and I was like laughing my ass off the whole time. I was like, "What is this?" Like, he's like peeing his pants, and I'm just like, "What is this movie? Like, what is Seed of Chucky?" But it was so hilarious. I loved it and they even do like Shining references in there.
Yeah,
like Seed of Chucky is one of the worst horror films probably, but it is so entertaining. It is so entertaining, so good.
And like one thing I like about Chucky is like the new TV show. Because I feel like that show balances out the seriousness of the first few movies and the comedy that came in with Bride and Seed. Because I feel like as a concept, Chucky is a killer doll, and with that, that's funny to a certain extent. That's funny, but at the same time, it should be like a full moon movie, like Demonic Toys, where it's obviously just a clear joke. And I feel like the TV show, especially with the first season, does a very excellent job in balancing serious moments and the funny moments.
Yeah, and Chucky getting creative on how he kills people, exactly. That was kind of a fresh take on him for me, and I enjoyed that. I got tired real quick of him chasing people around and like hiding underneath furniture with a knife all the time, but even in the first movie, like he took the voodoo doll of one of his friends and like played with it and broke different limbs on it. And I was like, yo, this is a cool version of Chucky that I could get used to. And did they keep that going in the TV show?
They did. So like the whole voodoo element, Don Mancini, the creator of Chucky, he was not a fan of, but he realized that it was something he should keep, but not really like super expand on in the next movies. So the voodoo element, it's still there to an extent, but it's one of those things where like it's never explored past a certain point because they have that whole like amulet, like the something of Damballa, that's like in the sequels and all that, and they had the retcon some stuff, and I feel like the voodoo element is a good element, but they should have expanded on it in the sequel instead of like trying to like erase it at first and then retconning a bunch of stuff.
Right, because it's just like the most iconic thing I remember about Chucky is the fact that he's trying to body jump with the kids. Yeah, so it's
play hide the soul.
Yeah.
But I stopped after Seed of Chucky. I stopped. I didn't watch the Cult or Curse. I didn't watch those two, and I haven't seen the TV series either.
Yeah, I haven't seen the reboot with like Aubrey Plaza yet.
I watched that one in theaters, and I forgot about it instantly. I'm gonna be honest.
It's not good. Like I feel like if you know that character, like the Chucky character in the remake, was an original character, it would have been a great movie. But I feel like trying to make Chucky this weird AI type robot doll, I'm just like, I can't get behind this. It was creative. I'll give them that. The kills were good, and one thing I liked about it was the whole like weird Jack Black janitor guy. But outside of that, like Jacob said, like the week after I saw it, I was like, that movie, I was trying to remember it because there were only like a few things that stuck out, but the concept, it was a good concept, but it wasn't good for a Chucky movie.
Mm-mm.
Well, I mean, they did the concept better just this year with Megan. If you've seen Megan,
Megan was not a good movie.
It's not great. It's not a great movie. I agree with that. It's not. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie though.
I thought it was entertaining.
I felt like they did better than what the Child's Play remake did with that concept.
I would say Megan is a bad movie. And personally, I'm not a fan of like the whole killer robo dolls subgenre. I like my killer doll movies to be like a ventriloquist dummy or like a toy or something like that. And
like something supernatural or magical.
Something supernatural, not like a robot or whatever.
Have you seen Dead Silence? I'm guessing then.
I have, yes, I have.
What do you think about that?
Creepiest movie.
Creepy ass movie, like I remember seeing the trailers on TV for it, and almost pissing myself every time.
Dude, me and you have the same experience then, because I think I was 7 when that movie came out, maybe 8, 9, and this is back when I watched wrestling, WWE, and they used to show the trailer for it like during commercial break.
Yes, I remember that.
And that trailer scared me so much because it's a little kid and he's like getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or something, and then it's like the old lady, and then you see all the dolls, and it's like I just remember having nightmares just from the commercial. So I didn't watch that movie until I think 3 years ago was the first time I put it on, and then I was like, the commercial was scarier than the movie. I mean,
it
is. The movie's a little creepy, but like the commercial had way more of effect on me than the whole movie did. I mean, I guess I watched it when I was older as well too. That probably helped. But like, they wasted potential with that one.
They really did. And like the one scary part about the trailer that really stood out to me was whenever the guy goes to the graveyard to bury the dummy, and he's like sitting in his car, and the dummy pops up right there. And like that movie was so scary to me because I was also getting like into Goosebumps around the same time. So I was reading like Night of the Living Dummy and all that. And like Jacob, and I watched the movie when I was probably like 13. So I thought it was like a good movie, but I rewatched it a couple years ago. And like Jacob said, they wasted it, honestly. They wasted the concept. It had so much potential. And I think they were just trying to like like just like build up the hype for it. But the thing is, like, there were some good scenes and a good background, but halfway through it kind of just like went down, really.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest trailers, arguably, for a horror movie that
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen. At least top 5 trailers, just the trailer alone.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, that trailer came out like 2006, 2007, and I still have scenes from the trailer in my head. Like I can still picture the trailer.
Yeah, and the concept they could have really had a ball with that. Like the fact that if you made noise, you would probably get smoked. It's just like you could do so much with that, and they did actually. What is the name of that movie with John Krasinski?
Quiet
in it-
Place.
Quiet Place. Like
Yeah.
that was a really good expansion on like if you make a noise, you're gonna get smoked. Type of movie. I love stuff like that.
I agree with that. I like I'm not as big on Quiet Place as everybody else though. They're kind of forgettable for me, both of them. They don't really hit home for me because the first one, John Krasinski is so stupid in that first one. Like the way the way the movie, I'm not going to spoil anything because it is still, I mean, it was 2019, 2017, 2018, whenever it came out. It came out one of those years. It hasn't been too long, so I won't spoil anything. But the way John Krasinski's character is handled in that first one, I was like, this is just emotional manipulation you're trying to do now because this is not. Why would he do that? That doesn't make sense. Like, yeah.
It got me like the first scene of the movie, the fact that they made noise and he lost his kids.
Oh yeah,
Because
that's a great opening. I will say that both of them have great openings.
Oh yes. I feel like A Quiet Place would have done better, in my opinion, as a short film compared to a feature film.
Yeah,
I feel like that too. I feel like the material was not there for a full feature length.
Was it Quiet Place based off a book?
I think it was an original idea written by John Krasinski. I'm pretty sure I think he wrote it.
Oh yeah, no, Bird Box. Bird Box was the book. Bird Box was the book.
Yeah.
Those two movies came out like around the same time, and I remember one of them was based off a book, but I was trying to remember which one.
Yeah, this is my first time hearing about the book. I'm gonna have to check this out.
Bird Box.
Wasn't the other half of the cast like Emily Blunt or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it had I think it had one of the. I think that was the only notable people. Yeah. The second one has a few more like familiar faces, but like, yeah, the first one on its own really just Jim from The Office and Emily Blunt.
Yeah. It's just like you making noise, you die in this movie. It's just like, okay, challenge accepted.
I don't know what scene?
The scene where like there was a flood in like the house or the basement or something like that with the baby in the carriage, and she's doing like everything she can to like keep the baby hidden and quiet. And I'm just like, okay, that was written very well, but everything else I could have done without.
And when she's having the whole pregnancy, when she's having the whole birth scene is, I mean, it's unrealistic. Kind of, it kind of stretches your credibility a little bit with that whole when she's in the bathtub having the baby or whatever. Like, yeah, I feel like I don't think that's how that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but like the tension that was there, it was really good. I will say it did create a good tension scene when she's trying to have the baby and the monster's coming up the stairs, and
just waiting, like make a noise, and he's gonna get something to eat.
He's gonna get a baby and a full person.
It's like, God, that movie didn't spare any lives either. So I respect that aspect of it too. Like, an old lady could get it, kids could get it.
I respect that. I like movies that take risks like that. Like a lot of people, I don't know if I want to say this on. I'll say it. I don't care. I like when movies kill kids.
Oh man.
Like I like when they take the risk and they like. Because like a lot of people are once you kill a kid in a movie, they're out. Like they will completely check out. And I get that if I'm not a parent, so I can't say, maybe if I'm a parent, I'll think differently. But like
Jacob, so.
Oh, you are, Nick?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, where's your kid? I've never met him. But yeah, I when they kill the kid in a movie, I'm like, okay, so now you kind of know that anything can happen if they, because that's like the one sin you don't break in a movie is like killing the kid. Yeah, I mean, you can kill the dog all you want. I'd rather see a kid get killed than that dog or cat in a movie. I'm sorry. When they kill the dog or the cat, I don't like that. I don't like that.
Right. It shows you like nobody has plot armor in this movie. You mess up,
Yeah.
you're gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Like when
I
they
feel
take
like
out the kid, I'm like, dang.
Yeah.
I feel like one bridge that makes the movie like a normal horror movie to like a disturbing horror movie is if the dog or the kid dies in like a more gruesome way over comical, you know. Like usually when the dog dies or when the kid dies or when the cat dies, it's usually played for laughs to a certain
Right.
extent and it's done off screen. But if they do it on screen, especially if it's a kid, I believe that makes it a more disturbing movie than something that tries to like separate itself from a movie that's seen by like your casual moviegoer.
Yeah, and it is a perfect example of that because you have to watch the kids get eaten, and it's insane. In some scenes, he doesn't even just flat out kill them; he toys with them a little bit. Like he was chasing like the chubby kid, and he was in some kind of locker room where the shower was at, and he made blood come out of the ground, and it was just like, dude, he is toying with him, and when actually in the original version with Tim Curry as Pennywise, that exact scene was even worse. So it was I really enjoyed that because nobody had plot armor.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I'll say about the It remakes. I'll take the miniseries all day over the new ones. That is a hot take. Everybody I know will roast me about that, but I will take Tim Curry's Pennywise and that miniseries over Bill Skarsgård and the new It movies any day.
I would too.
I think it's creepier.
I'm gonna say it. I'm sorry, guys. I have to say it. The miniseries is decent. I feel like one reason why the miniseries and a lot of other older horror movies are like, you know, held in higher esteem compared to remakes and reboots and all that is for mainly nostalgic purposes. I feel like a lot of times, a lot of the original horror movies, the quality isn't there when it comes to some remakes. I personally feel like the first It remake movie, Chapter 1, was better than the miniseries. The second one, on the other hand, if I had to rank them, it would be Chapter 1, the miniseries, and Chapter 2. I feel like with Chapter 2, they were stretching too much. They were trying to add too much information. And also at the same time, both of them really weren't a true, like, you know, Stephen King, like, adaptation because of the one chapter, the one scene we all know about. But I just feel like the miniseries is decent. But I feel like a lot of people only like it for nostalgic reasons.
Here's my argument against that, though.
There is no argument.
Yes, here's an argument, Nick. The miniseries has always been hated on. If you look back on it, it's always been trash. Like everybody's like, "Oh, that miniseries is too long. It's trash." Like all you hear about is Tim Curry's Pennywise. And when the new ones came out, like when the first one came out, they dogged the miniseries. They're like, "Oh, this is so much better than the miniseries," and like, "This is so great." And like, and then even when Chapter 2 came out, they were talking about the miniseries, and they're just like, they rank it above the miniseries. Like, it's so great, it's so awesome. And I'm just like, have you seen the miniseries? Because like I just rewatched the miniseries a year and a half ago. I introduced somebody to it because she had never seen it, and she was like, "This is better than the new ones," and I was like, "Yeah, it is, ain't it?" I was like, I feel like Tim Curry has the screen presence and the strength that he just carries that whole miniseries, and the kids section is done way better. The kids section, it has more of a Stand By Me feel, and the way they do the kids and the miniseries, since it's not cut out, and I mean it is cut into 2 parts, but like because you know it was a 2-night thing, but like the way it's put together, since it's like a full movie, the way they like introduce them as adults, and then it shows they get something happens to them, they get scared, and they have a flashback, and then it shows them as a kid. I feel like that was a way more creative way of telling the story than doing it just by the book, where they're kids in the first movie, adults in the second. I felt like.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like I think one problem that plagued both the miniseries and the movies is the book itself is like 1,000 pages. And and especially towards the end, it gets kind of wacky with like the whole turtle thing. And again, there was that one scene with the girl and like all the boys that was like pretty like controversial because I'm pretty sure Stephen King was on like coke when he wrote it.
But,
yeah, well, there's a famous quote. Stephen King said that he wrote it on cocaine, and I think he said cocaine and Miller Lite, I think is what the phrase was, or something.
And like, don't get me wrong. The miniseries has some really good moments. One moment from the miniseries I think is better than any scene in the remakes is when Pennywise is in the shower, kind of like mocking that one kid. I feel like that was a really good scene.
It was horrible, man.
It was terrifying.
Every time I took a shower, I imagined Pennywise coming through my drain, like opening the drain wide open, even though that can't happen. But just the way I just always imagined that.
He ruined that for me, man. Screw him.
One thing I will say about the remake, one negative thing, I feel like the only reason why the remake was made to a certain extent or why it became super popular was because of Stranger Things.
That's fact.
I feel like Stranger Things kicked off like a 5-year time frame where you had movies featuring young teens in a supernatural setting, and it would usually have an actor associated with Stranger Things. Because I know the girl in the It remake, she was in a Netflix show about a girl in Pennsylvania who had like superpowers or something like that. And I'm pretty sure it came out like a year after the first It remake. And again, I love the remake. I love the remake. But at the same time, 10 years from now, if I had to rewatch it or show it to a friend, I would tell them this is a very Stranger Things inspired movie. And that's the one thing I don't like about it. I really wish that they would have waited until Stranger Things had died out so it could have more of a Stephen King It style instead of a Stranger Things Duffer Brothers style, you know?
Well, yeah,
that's one negative thing I will say about the remake.
Because they even have one of the main kids, Finn Wolfhard, in it.
Yes. And I guess one counterpoint to that is he wasn't the main character, which I do like. I do like that he wasn't the main character. But then again, let's be honest. The only reason why he was even in that role in the first place was because of Stranger Things.
Yep.
And and just the whole kid dynamic was so Stranger Things.
It was. And
that's why I prefer the miniseries, is because it came out in 1990 and the kid dynamic is more like a more Stand By Me-ish kid dynamic than Stranger Things kid dynamic. I mean, like, I'd take Stand By Me over Stranger Things any day.
Oh, same. And like one dynamic they changed to making more Stranger Things is in the book and in the miniseries, the kids grew up in the 1950s. While in the remake, it was the 1980s, which obviously Stranger Things. And personally, that's one thing that I got tired of pretty fast was all the 80s nostalgia.
Yeah.
You know, I got tired of that pretty fast because I like Pac-Man. I like movies from the 80s, don't get me wrong. But I did not grow up. What?
I like Pac-Man.
But I did not grow up in the 80s. So I don't appreciate that material on the same level as someone who did grow up in the 80s would. And personally, the one movie that kind of like turned me off for like 80s nostalgia was Ready Player One. I have not read the book, but the movie, the only reason why the movie was made was just so your friends could go to the movie theater and like check stuff off a checklist. And
I completely agree.
The funny thing about that movie is Steven Spielberg said he would not include characters from his movies in there, but the T-Rex is in there from Jurassic Park, and there's like 2 other of his characters in there. So it's just like, come on, Steven, come on.
Man, that's wild to even think about because if anything, the most iconic scene from the miniseries of It will always be for me is Billy getting pulled into the sewer like that.
Yes.
The original death scene for him kind of like violated me for life.
Oh, you talking about Georgie?
Yeah, Georgie. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I like it done better in the miniseries, and because the remake is so because they use CGI when he's opening his mouth. It's like all alien like, and like
Yeah,
so when I know he bites off Georgie's arm, and you see it, and it's supposed to be like, oh, they actually did. And when I first watched the remake, I was like, I was like, I hope they actually show his arm getting bit off because I'm a sicko, and I was apparently. I was like, I want to see Georgie's arm get bit off because in the miniseries they just cut to black before it happens. But now that I'm older and I actually know about movies and like I'm smart and I have a developed brain, I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, it's way more better when it's subtle. When it's just like when it just cuts to black, all you see is his mouth open, his teeth are sharp, and you just hear Georgie scream. It's cut, and then you just see the stretcher with a sheet over it. I think that's done better.
and I feel like Pennywise was just improvising when he was talking to Georgie, where Tim Curry he had like a back and forth with Georgie, and then took him under the
I think
sewer.
he was more believable that a kid would interact with him than Bill
Yeah,
Skarsgård's Pennywise. Because Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise, if you're a kid from the get go, something's off with this thing. Like something's off with him completely.
immediately
Like he even growls at him at one point. I'm like, if a clown in a sewer is growling at me, even if I'm 6 years old, I'm running.
gone.
Tim Curry's Pennywise was so like inviting and he was nice. And it wasn't until he grabbed his arm where he really showed that he was, evil.
Yeah, it was the grab that got me. Now that I think about it, because I rather see him just yank the kid under the sewer instead of just coming out to bite him, takes the arm off, and then while the kid's crawling away, grabs him by the feet and brings him back
Yeah, because
under.
it even showed his arm, and his arm like stretches, and and you can tell it's a CGI digital arm, and I'm just like, oh, come on.
Man, they could have saved so much money on that.
Yeah, that's what I just don't get about horror movies. I feel like you can do so much with so little in horror if you just,
Well, like the problem is, that's true. But the thing is, a lot of these movies, especially the big studio ones, they're shooting on a limited amount of time. And in the
Yeah,
long run, they find out it's easier to do computer effects over practical, because that's one thing they did for like Cabin in the Woods, I think it was. They did like a mix of like computer effects and practical effects.
it
And
works in Cabin in the Woods though.
right. But, I'm not saying like, using computer effects in the It remake is okay. But the thing is, a lot of times they're shooting on a limited time schedule with really a limited budget. So they have to cut some corners. And for better or worse, computer effects have helped a lot of movies cut corners in some aspects.
honestly, I think they could just cut corners just by the way that they write the screenplay. Because if you make some small changes, you could get away with a lot.
I
That's
feel
what I'm
like
saying. Less is more
Yeah,
in a lot of terms.
I honestly feel like one way they could have cut corners for the It remake was firing Finn Wolfhard. Getting like a
yeah.
better. I'm sorry, Finn Wolfhard. He's not a good actor. He's decent at best. I will say this: I am excited to see him grow in the future.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see all the kids from Stranger Things and It move past that, to move past being attached with those shows and those movies. But at the same time, I am worried that they will be typecasted a lot down the road.
Yeah, I didn't like the dialogue the kids had in the remake. Otherwise, the story itself was pretty smooth. The way that the kids talk to each other was just a little bit unrealistic, especially for their age. And a lot of this stuff was just like jibber jabber, didn't get them anywhere. Where if you watch the mini series, the kids, every time the kids had a back and forth, they passed along information, they pushed the plot forward, and it was a lot more productive and more realistic conversations with kids back then in the 90s movie than the remake did. But
The kids is just a bunch of fast talking, and then they just added the F word a whole bunch. They were just like,
right.
that's like, hey kids, talk super fast and add the F word. And I mean, a lot of kids do. I mean, kids do cuss and they do talk like that. But I feel like it was too much. Like, okay, you need to be more hardcore here, little kid. Like they're like telling Finn Wolfhard to just go off.
Right.
I think they were trying to create a more hardcore alternative to Stranger Things by doing that. to show that like, hey, these kids are from the 80s, you know, and these kids are from the 80s. They cuss, they drink, they smoke, they're rougher, they're tougher. You know, they're trying to create like a rough side of the coin, if you will, in some and to some degree, because the town they're from and it's more of a rundown, rougher town than the town in Stranger Things.
Absolutely.
So I feel like they're trying to create that element in there personally, because I'm personally a fan of the dialogue from the It remake. That's just me, you know, but because I feel like it's realistic considering the time period and the social area they're from also.
Yeah, I would have let their dialogue slide a little bit. But they had so many opportunities though, because like in the miniseries, what was the name of their group? They're called the Losers or something
Yeah, the
like that.
Losers Club.
They had to deal with bullies, and the bullies kind of pushed the plot forward themselves, and it took them a while before they finally died. And then one of them stayed alive, got traumatized, and went to like an insane asylum. And then when they were all adults, one of them got inside of the hotel and stabbed one of the Losers Club. So they had so much going on that Pennywise was just like, yo, I'll jump in whenever you guys are finished. And I love that aspect of it. It really like highlighted the fact that bully traumatized them, and now they're adults. They still have to live with that on top of Pennywise like terrorizing the city. So it's just like I respect the writing behind that.
Well, that's.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jacob.
You go ahead, Nick.
Oh no, you.
I want to hear Nick. I want to hear what Nick's got to say.
So I guess, you know, bouncing off that, one thing about the remake I thought was decent and mid at times was how they handled the bullies. Because in the book, I think there were like 8 bullies in the book. And I think in the miniseries, they kind of like dumbed that down too. But in the remake, they only had 4. And one of them was a Roderick ripoff. I'm sorry. He looked like a Roderick ripoff. But they still had the whole like, you know, like setting of like they were bullying them and one got sent to a mental hospital. He broke out. Pennywise gave him his knife back and all that stuff, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, again, with that, they were trying to create that Stranger Things atmosphere vibe by making them 1D 80s bully characters. Because outside of like, you know, a few little quirks here and there, they had no real personality. They were just there to torment the losers, because there was one bully in the group who never said anything. He was just there. He was just there, you know.
Yeah.
But Jacob, go ahead with your opinion, please.
I completely zoned out. I completely forgot.
Man,
maybe
you're such a hater.
Maybe it's just because the remake is so forgettable that maybe I just forgot, you know. But like, I'm here. I'm a diehard miniseries over remake fan. I will defend that 1990 miniseries until I die. Tim Curry. Come on, man, Tim Curry.
GOAT.
That's all you gotta say is Tim Curry Pennywise, and you win the argument right there.
Immediately. Because
look, at Bill Skarsgård, you're gonna tell me Bill Skarsgård coming out of the fridge with all his CGI body and in his little he's too CGI'd. It's like
he does the dance and
yeah, he does a little dance. It's not even scary. I'm like, bro, this is a TikTok meme. Like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, like when they in the miniseries, when they finally met the true form of Pennywise and he changed into that computer generated spider, that scared the shit out of me, man. I was a grown ass man when I saw that, actually, and I didn't sleep with the lights off for a week.
See, people actually hate that ending. People hate the ending of the miniseries. They say that the spider does look terrible, but it was 1990, mind you, and it was a TV miniseries. But also, I feel like the spider was done better than the big It Chapter 2 with a $100 million budget in the theaters when he's got a giant Pennywise head on the spider legs.
Man, you are wrong, and it's so bad.
You're telling me that that looks better than the 1990s miniseries Spider.
Yes, ma'am. I will die on that hill too. I will die on the hill. Chapter 2 does not have a lot of good things. I will admit that, but that blows the 1990 miniseries ending out of the water.
I'll give them that.
But I will say this. talking about both of those forms of media, the miniseries and the remake, the ending of it, the book, it's really hard to do, in my opinion, because again, it gets kind of weird with the whole like turtle thing and all that. And I think a lot of times when people try to adapt it, they're scared about including that in there because they're worried about, like, I guess, confusing audience members or something like that. Because one thing I noticed about the chapter 2 of the remake was they were trying to rush in all that extra lore. They were trying to rush all that lore about the turtle, about the Indians, because in the first movie they never mentioned it at all, really. Then the second movie they're trying to play catch up.
Right.
But again, I will say though, Jacob, I will openly say this: that opinion, it's wrong. It's wrong.
Oh my, that opinion's wrong, huh?
Yeah, Billy Rhodes in the comments was saying, in regards to the bullies in the remake, that's kind of just how movies work. Unfortunately, there isn't enough time to get to know the tertiary characters, and it's like they set themselves up for that because their pacing was all over the place. You hardly got to in the remake. You hardly got to know the Losers Club themselves. Like you would see them live their lives, but you didn't hear like where everything came from, like in the miniseries did.
In the miniseries, I felt like the kids, you see them as friends. You see them as you could be like, oh, these kids would actually be friends. But like I feel like in the remake, you're like, oh, this is just a cast of kids that they casted that they just put together. Like they don't have really good chemistry, and like at the end when they're doing the whole, like cutting their hands and bleeding, holding hands, I'm like, y'all ain't even close. Like, come on, stop that.
Well, exactly. They built a rapport with the miniseries Losers Club, and the one of the bullies from the miniseries was actually racist. So and that they admitted that like right out the gate.
I think two counterpoints I have to that. Two counterpoints is one aspect about the miniseries that works better than the movie is it had more time to deal with the material. And more time to deal with the material, because let's be honest, if they actually came out with a 5-hour-long It movie, no one would really go see it. I personally would not go see it.
Okay, hold on. I have a counterpoint. Nick, I have a counterpoint.
I said you.
Your facts are wrong here, Nick.
My facts are wrong.
The miniseries is 3 hours and 40 minutes actually. And it's actually shorter. The miniseries is actually shorter than the 2 It movies put together. If you go, you can Google check me. You can fact check me right now.
Miniseries has less time. But I feel like you changed those numbers online. I feel like you wouldn't. You just changed those numbers.
Oh yeah, I own Google, and I changed. Yeah, that's why I'm still living in Missouri because I own Google. Yeah. I went to SEMO because I own Google. Yep.
But I guess my second counterpoint, I was going to mention earlier before I got interrupted.
I destroyed that counterpoint.
No, you did not. No, you did not. Anyway,
I destroyed it.
The second counterpoint I want to make about the whole like knife cutting scene, they only included that scene in there, and I've already mentioned this, is in the book there was a very controversial sex scene. And whenever they have to adapt it as a mini series or a longer movie or whatever, they have to figure out some way to take that scene out, but still include the core idea of them like connecting themselves with each other or something like that. And so that's why they had the whole like knife cutting scene. It was a replacement for that scene because they actually included that scene from the book in the movie. That movie would have failed epically.
I honestly think they just took too long. They took too long to build that bond and create connections with the characters. If they would have did that from the jump like that, I wouldn't have any complaints.
And I get what you're saying, Nick, about like the whole they had to do something more graphic, I guess, and to like show that bond.
Not graphic, but more.
I know what you mean, like more, but like my problem is not with the cutting hands and the blood scene. That's not my problem. My problem is it didn't feel earned. That's my problem. It didn't feel earned. Like if the kids did it in the miniseries, I would like I could see that. I was like, okay, I could see them doing that because they're really close. But the kids in the remake, I'm telling you, they just feel like they just picked a bunch of kid actors because one of them is like plays Star-Lord in the MCU in the first movie, and
Yeah.
then one of them is from Stranger Things, and one of them is from something else. It's like they just took a bunch of famous little kid actors and like be
Shoved them
friends.
together. Yeah.
Cuss.
Well, again, that's one criticism I have of the remakes is that casting is a side effect of the whole Stranger Things popularity. I will admit that, but I also do think a majority of the kid actors do an amazing job with their role. I will say Finn Wolfhard's character wasn't that great. I feel like it was too obnoxious at times.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like the majority kid actors in that movie did a very excellent job. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Chapter 2, I feel like the adults they picked the adults they picked the adults they picked in that movie were good counterparts for the kid actors. I will say that.
Yeah, I can give him that.
I take the adults in the miniseries. I like Bill Hader. As Finn
True.
Wolfhard growed up. He's good, and Jessica Chastain was good. But like other than that, end of the day, miniseries, man. 1990 miniseries. Anybody who hasn't seen it watching this, don't even bother with the new ones. Don't even look at them. Just go back to 1990, and just watch the miniseries, and you will be blown away.
I mean, I watch it every night before I go to sleep because it makes me tired, but...
Well, okay. Well,
Wait a minute.
I watch the remakes every night to go to sleep because it makes me tired.
No,
I
that's
also watch the Candyman too because it just makes me so tired. You know, the new Candyman remake.
Man, you're stealing my jokes so bad right now.
Like I just watch all of them to go to bed. They're just boring.
So Billy's got another comment. Says there were some racist tones in the remake. I kind of feel like they tone it down mostly because they didn't want to do that to a kid on set. Man, they had no restraints in the 90s though, because the way they treated that black kid, I can't remember his name.
Mike.
It was
Was it Mike?
Wasn't Mike? It was Mike. It was Mike.
Yeah.
Was Lucas the fat kid?
Yeah.
I forgot what the fat kid's
I know he
name
had.
was.
Yeah, the black kid had glasses as a child, and then he grew up and didn't wear glasses anymore as an adult.
Mike. I think it's Mike.
Yeah, it is Mike.
Yeah. And he ended up being the one that stayed in Derry when everyone left Derry. And but there was still like a lot of racism around. Like the bully and his dad both didn't like people of color, and it's just like that made the movie feel so real because it's just like you never know, like in your local community, who is and who isn't,
right?
And
especially
to have a bully,
in the 50s.
Yeah,
in the 50s, well, that had to be rough.
Yeah,
I think that's one, talking about his comment, that's one key difference because the miniseries was based in the 80s and in the 50s when Jim Crow was still very much a system used in America, while the remake was set in the 80s, where for the most part there was still racism, but it wasn't on such a high level as it was in the 50s. And there is one scene in the remake where they grab Stan's yarmulke and they spit in it and they throw it across like the schoolyard. And I think one thing in my personal opinion, what they were trying to do with the remake when it comes to that stuff, they were trying to make it more entertaining than like, this black kid's getting bullied because he's black, or this Jewish kid is getting bullied because he's Jewish. But at the same time, they still wanted to like make that reality clear,
Yeah, they should have just kept it. Honestly, it raised the stakes for them.
They kept the Ho Beverly though. They kept her whole storyline. I mean, that's pretty rough too. Her storyline with her dad. If you can keep that, why can't you keep the other? Because I feel like that's just as important to tell.
Oh no, it is, and like it is, and like I'm not saying that's not, but I feel like, from my personal opinion, after watching the remake and really looking at like the social climate and the types of media that was really being consumed, and again, these actors were coming off the whole Stranger Things side effect, if you will. They wanted to make it more entertaining than, you know, kind of like painting this harsh reality for like every member, if that makes sense.
Well, you can tell that
Yeah.
too because even in the remake, they have like 80s music in there, and they add like music to the soundtrack. And in the 1990s, it's just score. And there's like one scene. There's one scene when they're riding. I love the scene when they're riding the bike in the miniseries. I think it's Mike and Bill. And they're like,
Yeah.
it's when they first meet up, and they're like riding a bike, and it cuts back to them when they were younger, and then it cuts back to them when they're older, and it's got that fun like 1970s type music. And I'm like, oh, like that's the only song they use. But like in the remake, they try to throw in like 80s music, and it's just, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you know, again, I'm just saying, you know, like that's a Stranger Things side effect.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Stranger Things side effect.
And
And
they even show the new Kids on the Block poster that the chubby kid has, you know.
yeah, because
he has the poster on his wall or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, Jacob, because, you know, New Kids on the Block was a band from the 80s. You know, it was a very popular band.
I wasn't born in the 80s. I don't know.
We got Hater Mania up in here. Hater Mania.
Yeah, I know some parts of the book was supposed to be like very graphic as far as like the sexual stuff. Cause I know Bev, like she, wasn't she the person that was involved with the sex scene?
Oh, it's basically. I'll just say one thing, and this will give the viewers an idea. Train. That's all I'll say.
Oh no.
Choo choo.
Chugga, choo.
That's all I'll say about what happens. Train.
Man, that movie had so much balance and attention to detail, and I'm talking about the miniseries, of course.
Man,
so much balance and attention to detail. It's just like, man, continuity too. Oh my god, it's just like
I feel like it's written better. Like I love how they like show the adults, and they're like. The adults start like having panic attacks. Like there's one scene that cuts close on Bill and he's like sweating, and then it cuts back to like what happened with Pennywise when he was a kid. And I love the way they told the story in that way instead of doing it straightforward where they're just kids in one movie, adults in the next. I like it being like going back and forth, non-narrative, like, you know, kind of Tarantino-esque in a way. It's
right,
you know, cutting back and forth. I like that.
Yeah, I definitely would have executed it that way myself because you get so much connection between all the characters, and it's just like when Pennywise or they're finally pursuing Pennywise in the sewer together, it makes sense. It's just like they're teaming up. They split up and they partner up with who they think they should be with, and then they try to chase down Pennywise that way, and then they come up with like a strategy to take him down, and it's just like it all makes sense because they do that. On a regular before Pennywise came around, like they strategized in dealing with bullies and all sorts of things. So I really respected that.
Before we get off topic about it, I want to say the one thing that I really didn't appreciate about the remake and the new ones is they put. If you watch the miniseries, Mike has a very integral role. Like if you in the book too. In the book and in the miniseries, he has a very integral role to the whole story. He's the one that brings them all together. He's the one that, you know, brings them all back. He's the one that, because like they're all kind of mean to each other at first. He's the one that like gets them back in the friend zone and like, you know, like, hey, we're all friends here. He's the one that groups them together. He's kind of like the glue of the whole group, really, and he has a really integral part. And I feel like the remake, just kind of sideline him. I mean, he has the one scene where he shoots Pennywise with the little thing that he does to the goats or the lambs or whatever, and then in the second one he's just doing a trippy Indian thing where he goes off and gets some kind of weird drug to try to catch Pennywise or whatever. But that's basically all they do with Mike's character, and I feel like the miniseries actually makes Mike's character the most interesting and arguably the most integral, even more than Billy, because he's the one. Mike is the glue in the miniseries, and I feel like they kind of, in a way, especially if they want to be more forward with storytelling about, you know, like have more people in rows of color, you know, why would you cut it? I just thought that was weird how they just like the 1990 version did Mike so much better than the modern version where they just like he's basically a nothing character. He's like the least character in both movies, and I'm just like, he is so interesting in the miniseries. Like he's the glue. Like
Yeah, and
that's
he's
what I think.
bouncing back from things too. Like he's stuff going on with his family, and then he's got the racist bullies too. On top
Yeah,
of
and like
that,
and like he's like, you can see that he's like sad that he still lives in the town, as he's the only one that was left in town. You can see like he's happy that he's there, but he's also kind of like sad that all of his friends went off and did big things, and here he is working at the library. Like,
right,
you feel his inner turmoil, but he's still basically like the guy. Like he gets them together. He's the glue, and you get a lot of time. And his relationship with Bill is really well done. Like they're the two main characters really of the story. And like the remake, they just water Mike down so much. It shocked me. Like when I went back after I watched the remake and the second one, I went back and watched the miniseries, and like Mike's character is just completely watered down in the new ones. And I'm just like, you think, because you think we live in more progressive times, you think they'd want to do something with a person of color in a more integral role than watering down the role from 1990. You think it'd be more than less.
right. There's so many innovative ways that you can handle Mike too. Like you have an alternative. Like if you don't want him to be bullied by racists and you don't want him to reunite the Losers Club, find something better. Like don't completely sideline him. And
they even cast like the Old Spice guy to play him in the Chapter 2 one. I'm like, the guy that plays him in the miniseries, I believe he's the father on ain't he the dad on what's that show? The Twins. It's a Twins. It's a 90s Disney show. You know what I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
I think it's not Danny Glover. No,
it's not Danny Glover.
Or was it live action?
It's live action. It's the twins. It's the twin sisters. They were in a Disney movie called Twitches, but before that they had a sister.
Saw Twitches. I've seen Twitches. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, the girls in there, they had a show called Sister, and he's the dad on that show. And I feel like he's a far better actor than the Old Spice guy they casted him too. And again, I just feel like if you're trying to be more because they're trying to be more progressive, I guess, with the remake. But yeah, exactly, sister.
Yeah,
they're really not, because they water down Mike completely. And like he is so interesting in that miniseries because he's basically the Iron Man. If you want to go Avengers reference, he's basically the Iron Man of the group. He brings he's the leader of the. Well, no, he might be more Captain America then, because it depends on how you look at it. Because he just brings he's like the main head of the group, that glue that keeps them together, basically.
Yeah, I'll have to IMDb the cast or something, because it's going to kill me, because it was a really big name dude that played Mike for the miniseries, and it was another big name dude that played Mike for the remake too. So he does look like the Old Spice guy.
It is the Old Spice guy. It was actually
Nice.
that. I remember that. And I was like, why would you cast? I mean, he could have been a good actor, but he may have not. They just didn't give him enough stuff to work with.
Yeah, the screenplay did him dirty, honestly.
I feel like one thing about Chapter 2 is like I personally feel like they did Mike a good job in Chapter 2, because I think it's kind of lazy just to brush his whole role off in Chapter 2 as the crazy Indian scene. He did a lot in Chapter 2, in my opinion. Not as much as the miniseries, I will say that.
Yeah,
but I will say he did more than the crazy Indian scene in Chapter 2. I feel that. And I feel like one thing about the It movie is a lot of people were just going to see it for Pennywise and Pennywise alone. I feel like when it comes to It as a franchise as a whole, people care more about Pennywise than they do the Losers Club. And so I feel like the remakes are a great representation of that, because we get these superficial, elemental looks into their lives and all that without a lot of extra background. And a lot of people were fine with that. A lot of people were like, this is fine. I came here to see Pennywise. And I feel like they could have done more with Mike in Chapter 2. I honestly feel like they could have even squeezed out a Chapter 3 and took out some elements of Chapter 2 and put them in like a Chapter 3, really. But I feel like comparing his role from the first It remake, where again he had barely any screen time or like any notable scenes, but on the same level, that was basically like the thing about the Losers Club in the remake. I feel like it's split down the middle between they had a big role and they had a small role between the two movies themselves.
Right.
I feel like Ben Wolfhard in both movies, his character had a pretty big role. Billy had a pretty big role. Bev had a pretty big role. But Stan in the second movie, I mean, obviously his role was cut short. And Mike, and I feel like Mike had a bigger role in chapter 2 compared to chapter 1. And I feel like the fat kid had I would say he had the same size role in both movies.
I love how we don't even know his name. We just call him the fat kid.
The fat kid. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was like, wasn't it like, it was Ben. It was Ben.
Ben, yeah. Because Beverly was like, oh, you gotten handsome. And it's
like, you know what, Bev? You didn't want me then. You don't get me now.
But
back then, she didn't want me.
One more thing I will say about, Jacob's comment about the movie being more progressive. I'm going to touch back on Candyman. I feel like it and Candyman are two different movies when it comes to those type of social elements, in my opinion. Candyman had a message that was rooted in social issues to begin with. And I feel like it is more of your more mainstream white mom type of media where people can go watch it. They can, people can go watch in movie theaters. They can get scared. And, that's basically it. And I'm not saying that's okay, but I'm saying when you look at it and comparing it to movies like Candyman and even Hellraiser, there's a different level of social issues in there. And that I would say that's because Stephen King, for the most part, in my opinion, does not touch on like a ton of social issues to begin with.
Right. And honestly, when it comes to the directors and the writers, they could just be selective which issue they want to touch on. Is like if you're going to reboot a series, but you're going to make like a major change, like one of the key members of the Losers Club is no longer going to be the guy that unites the Losers Club, or the guy that goes through a whole lot of traumatic experiences growing up because his racist bully. And then actually, like, what did it for me was the fact that when he became an adult after all he's been through, like the bully got out the insane asylum with the knife that Pennywise gave him and ended up in the hotel with him and stabbing him. So like the whole Losers Club is like on the floor with him in the hotel, like over his body, like hoping he doesn't die and praying for him. And I'm just on the edge of my seat, like, oh my God, the one black guy in this movie is about to just got murdered by like this racist bully that he grew up with. And it's like, it's so tragic, but to see him bounce back from that in the end and be brave enough to go in the sewer with Beverly and the others to face the spider demon, like, I really respected the miniseries so much more because how all of that led up to that.
I will say this. One thing about the miniseries is when you compare it to other Stephen King movies and miniseries that came out in the 80s or in the 90s, I would put it in the top 3. I feel like The Shining and The Dead Zone are Stephen King's best works from like that time period.
Yeah.
Because he came out with a lot of bad movies and TV shows and miniseries around that time period. So I feel like the It miniseries pre-2000 is one of the better Stephen King movies miniseries from like the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, and I had a strong appreciation for Pet Sematary and Cujo, so I guess it's just a Stephen King fan in me. Yeah.
Pet Sematary. I feel like the remake of Pet Sematary had potential, but I'm gonna be honest, the original was so much better in my opinion.
I haven't even seen the remake.
Remake. Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, the remake's pretty decent now that I think about it, but the original slaps.
I watched the original once, and I watched it once a few years ago, and that's one of the first horror movies in a long time that actually got under my skin and got to me. Like I was like, because I watched it and I was like, you know, because everybody was talking about, you know, you got to watch Pet Sematary. It's so traumatizing or whatever. I was like, no, there's no way. And I watched it and I
Yeah.
was like, oh man, like this is something. Like maybe the acting might not be. Some people complain about the dad actor in that one, and yeah, he's not the best actor, but like really, all the other stuff just trumps it because like it is really a disturbing movie.
And
Like
you forget about it. Yeah.
like I don't want to ever like really want to rewatch it because it's just like I don't want to put myself through that again.
Absolutely not. I really wish that he would have expanded more on like the Wendigo that was out in the forest.
Oh,
That
yes.
would have been really cool to see more of it in a live action film. But I was satisfied with what they had to work with anyway, because it's just like the very first like 10-15 minutes of the movie, you see a kid get hit by a vehicle, and it's just
Oh, yeah.
like it's like holy shit, Steven, what is going on here, dude? And that will forever stay in my mind. Steven has that kind of effect on people when you consume his content, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, like I feel like one thing about Stephen King in like recent years, like the past 10 years, he's been trying to break away from horror and he's been writing more like mystery novels and other genres. But I feel like his horror works, especially his original stuff and his short stories, will always be his top work. His top work.
Easily.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I haven't read Stephen King. I'm not a reader. I'm a movie guy. That's why I'm here. But like, his movies. If I see based on a Stephen King novel, I'm there. You sold me. Like I will check out anything that's based off a Stephen King novel.
Absolutely. And he's got more and more and more just popping on shelves and whatnot. So it's just like I got to
Because
keep
like
my ears glued. Yeah,
they're not good. They're at least interesting, and they at least are weird and kind of different. They're at least different. They're never really like vanilla. There's always something weird or spicy to them. You know, there's not one that's just boring.
and you never forget them. You
Yeah.
don't forget anything that Stephen King is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Nick's getting ready to bounce, and we actually did pretty well on time. Before we get into like announcements, anything real quick, did you have like a score for Evil Dead Rise?
Oh yeah, I did. I'm actually I want Nick to go first.
Okay, so my score for Evil Dead Rise. So like my score for the remake is a 9 out of 10. That being said, my score for Evil Dead Rise, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. I know I sounded more harsh on it, but
Yeah.
overall, I thought it was a good movie, but I would put it in like my bottom 3 of like my favorite Evil Dead movies.
That's fair enough.
Okay, I have a question. What is your top 3 then? I know you said Evil Dead, but then
So like if I had to rate the Evil Dead movies, it would be the remake, the 2013 remake is number 1, the original is number 2, and Evil Dead Rise is number 3.
that is a shocking list. So not part 2? Part 2's not in top 3?
Part 2, I like Part 2, don't get me wrong. Part 2 is a good movie, but there's just something about the first one, just the vibe and the aesthetic of the first one, where it feels more dangerous than the second one. The second one feels more goofy, and like I know that's what he wanted, but the first one, there's just that element of danger that I don't think's in the sequels until we get to the remake.
I agree with that.
That's fair enough.
All right. Well, if I had to rank them, I mean, 1 is part 2, Evil Dead Part 2. I feel like it's everything you want in an Evil Dead movie. It's gore, and it's also got that Sam Raimi slapstick, and it's just the most memorable for me. And then the second one, probably Evil Dead Rise. And then the third one, I'm going Army of Darkness. I kind of like the
Nice.
more campier side of Evil Dead. I kind of like the more campier than gory side. And I'd put the remake last. The remake is I'd actually give the remake because I do grades. So the remake, I would give like a C, honestly. Like I do not care for the remake. that much at all. It's decent. That's about it. But for Evil Dead Rise, I'm gonna go. This might be a little shocking, but I'm gonna go A. I'd give it a solid A. Honestly, it's almost an A- there because
Yeah.
the setup is kind of lazy. How it's just the earthquake and then they find the record. I mean, the setup was lazy, and the end is not very connected with the whole girl going on the vacation. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about,
that's
but like,
Right.
it's not because like you think she would have heard all that commotion. You know, like
right.
it's kind of hard to believe that. I feel like they kind of shot themselves in the foot at the end there, because I feel like she would have heard all of it, because this isn't really spoilers, because it's just a girl that's leaving the hotel that stayed in the same hotel as the Evil Dead stuff that goes down, and she would have heard some stuff.
Right.
Oh,
Like,
no doubt about it. No
you would
doubt.
hear the Deadite saying "Mommy's with the maggots now." You know, you would hear her saying something like that, and not just, you know. I mean, the power was out. What was she doing? But yeah.
I don't know. So it's like a solid A, maybe like a 9 out of 10, 9.5 probably.
If out of 10, if I'm going out of 10, because my grades are a little weird. If I'm going out of 10, I'd say 9 out of 10. If I'm going out of
Nice.
10.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. But
I will
yeah.
I will say this. My last final thought on the Evil Dead franchise. I feel like the first movie, in my opinion, the first movie is one of the better ones. But I feel like when comparing it to the second one is a quicker watch. Because I feel like the first one, especially in the beginning, is kind of a slow burn for the most part.
Well, yeah, the second one is basically remaking a lot of the first one too,
Yeah.
because they had more money.
Right, yeah.
So they're just kind of speeding through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, true that. Billy wanted to know, what were you saying about Army of Darkness?
Oh, I think it's the third best Evil Dead. I love the campiness of it. I love it going back in time, and I love the medieval aspect with the witches, and I love the stop motion effects.
Absolutely.
It's got the what's that one? It's kind of got like the Clash of the Titans kind of stop motion effects, like the old Clash of the Titans. It's got that type of stop motion I like about it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got on Evil Dead. So yeah, Nick, we appreciate you for coming out and hanging in with us. I know you needed to get off like ASAP, but hour and 47 minutes. That was a good conversation though.
Oh no, honestly it was. Like, I mean, thank you guys for having me. You know, both of you guys had very good, very insighted opinions on the films we talked about. Even though I said Jacob had some wrong opinions, they were still pretty solid opinions. They were still opinions that I can like respect and, you know, like not agree with, but I'll be like, you know, that's a solid opinion. I thank you guys for having me on here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Nick, and we'll see more of Nick. Don't worry.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You will. Yes, you will. All right, so I will see both of you later. Both of you have a good night.
You have a good night,
All
Nick.
right, man. Have a good one. Let's see. There we go. So you had anything big that you have coming up that you needed to announce, or
anything big? I just want to say I love how we went from Evil Dead Rise to Candyman to Stephen King It for like a whole hour. We just went on a tangent about the It miniseries, but that just shows how much I love the miniseries. I can talk about that miniseries any time of the day, anytime.
Absolutely.
Anybody wants to come up, anybody sees me in person, you want to come up to me and say, "Hey, let's talk about the miniseries for an hour." I'll talk with you about the miniseries for an hour. I will never not sing praise for that movie because it is so hated for no reason. It's so great. But and other than that, no, I will be seeing Spider-Verse next weekend, and I will be seeing what's the other one that comes out? There's another one, The Boogeyman.
Boogeyman. Yeah.
I am interested in that. I think it's the writers or it's the producers of something connected to Quiet Place that wrote it. So I will have that, I guess, either a podcast or, which we'll get into that in a minute, but podcast or written review of those two movies for sure. So be on the lookout for that. But other than that, be ready for June is all I'll say. Be ready for June because Whew.
Yeah, it's going down.
I love movies, but June might take me out. It might kill me.
Yeah.
I might die for the content. You know,
Yeah.
because like, whew, that's a lot of movies coming out in June.
Man, that's gonna be some money being spent at that theater.
Yeah, so you guys should really subscribe and like and everything on Saturday Night Nerds, because we need the money. We
We
need the
need to
money for the movie
support
tickets, y'all. Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
we're you know we're still kind of in that college era. I mean, I figured that was you, Chris. What's up, Chris? He's an old buddy of mine from high school. He's a great friend of mine. You missed a whole talk on it, but yeah, if you want to subscribe to Saturday Night Nerds, everything podcast, subscribe, like, share all of our stuff. I mean, Jacob's Film Perspectives is now being eaten by Saturday Night Nerds. I'm gonna say that sounds weird, kind of sexual, seductive, but I like it.
Guilty?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I like it because, like, I mean, eat me up. I mean, I'm happy to become a part of it, and yeah.
Yeah, you guys are looking at our movie boss now.
I'm the boss of movies, y'all.
He's the movie boss. And no, I have not seen Into the Spider-Verse just yet, but
crazy.
I'm going to watch it either Sunday or Monday, as long as nothing gets in my way.
As long as Charlie Cox doesn't come back to you.
True. Or Kingpin puts a hit on me. Yeah. Because I said something he didn't like. Oh. Thank you for the sub, Chris. We'll definitely have some new episode announcements coming. If you want to keep tabs on anything, we'll post more on YouTube. But our IG and our Facebook group is where you can catch all of our announcements. And Jacob will even hit me up, and I'll make the posters for like his next episode whenever he wants to go live.
Yeah, I will probably. I'll probably. Right now, since we're transitioning, I'll probably still do the written reviews for you guys. If any of y'all are watching that follow me, just that have joined because you follow me, definitely subscribe to this network, because this is going to be where a lot of my stuff is now. I kind of would like to just put it all with Saturday Night Nerds, but I will be, because I know some might not see this or whatever, so I'll be still posting my written reviews when I can, but I'd like to transition to just doing it with this network, because I really I like these guys, and I want to help build the brand, basically build the content, because these are some, I mean, I've been talking with these guys for about a month and a half now, and yeah, I mean, I'm very thankful to be a part of it.
We're glad to have you, man. We got fellow SEMO alumni and nerds alike, so we got
there's a lot of great people. There's a lot of great people on this network. You guys should really subscribe.
Absolutely.
Very
we
intelligent.
may even bring some friends in and just talk trash with them on occasional episodes.
Who knows? So. I may bring you guys. I have some crazy friends. I could bring a crazy friend on one of Jacob's Film Perspectives, and they may go off the rails, but it'll be entertaining.
it will. That's good content.
Yeah, I mean, just anything for the content. Maybe I'll find a homeless guy on the street. You know, I live in Charleston. I could probably find somebody that's. I could probably find a tweaking man. You know, somebody that's tweaking.
Yeah.
Put them on here, and you know, we can get some content building.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, Chris, appreciate you for coming out, man, and supporting Jacob in his new series. And thank everybody for coming out and supporting Jacob in his new series. So
yeah,
Billy,
I greatly appreciate it, all of y'all. And stay safe out there, Chris. He's on patrol right now. Stay safe out there, man.
Stay safe, brother.
Appreciate the support, man. You're my guy.
Yes, sir. And then my last announcement, I'll probably go into more detail about it on social media, but for those that haven't been kept up to date yet, Saturday Night Nerds just branched off from Dat Feelin' Podcast Network. So we are officially independent now, and we are starting the Saturday Night Nerds Network. So you'll already see that on the YouTube channel. We'll move it to the Twitch, Twitter, and IG as well. But yeah, we'll have a couple spinoffs going. Jacob's Films Perspective will be at the very top, and you'll have constant content with him reviewing movies, either written or live stream, whichever one he prefers. So we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be a really exciting future going forward. And as soon as we go viral, at least you say you was there with us in the very beginning. So
yeah, I'm here at the beginning. I'm here for it.
Yeah, thank all the fans for their support and being our day ones, man. It's gonna be crazy because it's like I have a vision, and all of us are just like getting panels at different conventions and all that, and then we'll be able to meet celebrities a lot more often and get our name out, because me and Jacob are both filmmakers, so that's our priority number one. So
yeah, this is just a hobby, honestly.
exactly.
Like, I'd rather make a movie than talk about a movie, if we're being honest. But like, I love talking movies. So like I said, I've always wanted to be on a podcast. That was one of my goals, set up a podcast. And what better way than to join the greatest podcast there is? So I mean, Saturday Night Nerds is the greatest.
Thank you.
Greatest podcast. Hardest working people. Honestly, I'm not even just saying that because they handed me the keys to the movie kingdom, as you would like to say. Like, I'm saying, like, all these guys in this group, all these girls and guys, they're great people, down to earth, and we all just want to grow together.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we're all just one big happy nerdy ass family, and we're looking out for each other. If one person eats, we all eat. So
yeah.
And speaking of eating, yeah, Billy, if you want to nerd out with us and talk about recipes in future streams, man, we're always down to talk trash and listening to some gems that you got to drop.
I see Billy also talked about you guys should talk about Paul Verhoeven movies next week. That could be Jacob's Film Perspectives. That could be. I plan on having a segment with adding, because Nick, who was here most of the thing, he doesn't really watch newer movies as much as I do, but he watches a lot of older movies, and I feel like me and Nick could have a little 10-20 minute segment where we talk about Paul Verhoeven movies like Total Recall, RoboCop, stuff like that, because he is an interesting director. That could be a possibility, Billy, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's content for days, man. You can never run out.
I mean, I'm just taking the movie side. You guys, Deontay over here, everybody, he's still got the anime, video games, TV shows. Like, I act like I have a hard job. You got just anime, really?
Oh man, and just when you think you're caught up on something, it's like 10,000 other stuff you gotta watch. So it's a never-ending grind, and I'm not a huge fan of the demand, but I like the results that I get when I meet it. So I don't have too much of a problem with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Chris. Yeah, my buddy Chris. He's a big gamer, and he's into anime too as well. So maybe, Chris, I can get you into touch with Deontay here, and you can work something out with him, because we're always looking for people to come on, talk stuff. I mean, I'm just the movie guy. I mean, you see the posters behind me. I mean, I wish I had better lighting so I could show my Drive poster, because that's my pride and joy. That's probably my top 5 favorite movie. It's Ryan Gosling. It's amazing. Have you seen Drive?
I have.
Do you like it?
It was great.
Okay.
I'm not a big Ryan Gosling fan, but that was good for him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, if you said you didn't like Drive, I might have to leave the network and deuces. I'm gone. But no. But yeah, Drive is. That's my last. Drive is a great movie, guys. Go watch it. Ryan Gosling. That has nothing to do with horror, but Doesn't matter. It's a great movie. Go watch it.
Absolutely. If you don't got anything to do on your weekend, you got a Saturday night, you ain't got
Drive.
shit to watch, drive.
I can't do it right. It's that.
That.
God, I need to work this out. Okay, it's that. Drive. Yeah.
And I got to watch Into the Spider-Verse before I end up getting beat up by a whole mob of comically inclined members. Or
I'll come beat you up as well as
Right.
a movie guy, because Spider-Verse is a great movie.
And I'm about to walk into the sequel not knowing anything, so I need to get on this. So
That'll be good to actually watch it right before you watch because I haven't seen Spider-Verse in a few years. So that might be more beneficial for you watching it now, so you have it more fresh in your head for the new one sequel.
yeah, and if you do go live to review the second one, I'll definitely be caught up and up to date by then. So
oh yeah, if I do go live, you're definitely on it. Yeah, for sure.
absolutely. But yeah, that's all I got. So we'll catch you guys at the next episode. So stay tuned and follow us on our social media. Once you follow one, you'll probably have access to the rest of them because there's links everywhere. And one link tree just has all of our social media in it. Our YouTube account has it, so you can find it there. And if you already have us on IG, you can hop into the Facebook group and see all the trash we're talking there. And then you catch us when we go live. So we appreciate you guys.
You can find me at Jacob's Film. It's spelled wrong on the thing, but it's spelled right at the bottom. I typed it wrong on the thing. It's Jacob's. It's too many S's. But yeah, he did it right on the bottom. It's actually done right on the bottom. So yeah, just look up that on Instagram and Facebook, and then follow me, and I'll be sharing Saturday Night Nerd stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, you'll be able to find us with no problem. So, all right, Chris, man, you have yourself a safe Saturday night.
Yes, sir. Be safe, Chris.
Billy and Kimpachi, thank you guys for coming by as well. You guys enjoy your Saturday night as well. And to everybody else that's watching, thanks again. We will see you back for the next episode of Jacob's Films Perspective at a later time. Let's see. And peace.